recording.
Okay, everyone's in.
Great, thank you very much. So we'll call this South Regional District Planning Committee meeting to order here Wednesday, June 5th already. Summer's almost here. I'd like to acknowledge we're holding the meeting on Tla'amin traditional lands, and the first order of business is approval of the agenda. So moved. Thank you, Director Gisborne, Director McCormick. Discussion. Those in favor? Thank you. Next, adoption of the minutes for May 1st.
Recording in progress.
Knew that was gonna happen. That's okay. Much. Adoption of the minutes, our last minutes there. South Regional District Planning Committee meeting to order. Director McCormick, seconded. Any omissions? I should have asked that, but I haven't heard any. So all those in favor of adoption? That's passed, carried. Thank you. Next, this is a little bit new for me, but we do have delegation. But the first order of business is an invitation to participate. So I've learned that we need to make a motion to approve that representatives from the Tla'amin Nation and the Agricultural Advisory Committee can engage in the presentation by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food regarding land use planning for agriculture. And I saw that, Director McCormick, thanks. Director Gisborne, any discussion on this motion? Makes sense, good, all those in favor? That's carried, thanks. So the next order of business is our invitation, and I think it's virtual. We got a few folks, so the corporate officer. Sure we're good to go, or is that Ms. West?
Thank you, Chair. Reed Bailey has not joined us yet, so perhaps we would like to come back to this item.
Okay. We don't have the presentation. I guess we can't do it. So if everybody understands that, we'll move on to unfinished business. This is 5.1 on our agenda. Got a few recommendations here. So this one was postponed from our May 1st meeting. Had some more discussion on that. Should we move these separately, or is it an and?
They're two separate.
Okay, so the first recommendation is to the board that the floor area ratio and lot coverage ratio report April 12th of this year be entered into the minutes and filed. So moved. Thank you, Director Gisborne and Director McCormick. Any discussion on that? Director Gisborne.
Yeah. So I'd like to thank the staff for bringing this report forward. Lot coverage in relation to housing, I think, is a very important matter because it creates. I was really actually hoping we'd have our agricultural presentation because they actually did touch on lot coverage and floor area ratio in relation to agricultural use. The report is really good, but it touches on how, if we wanted to go down the road of regulating density rather than the number of dwelling units, going to the floor area ratio model or the lot coverage ratio model, it's kind of new territory when we're looking at an electoral area, because it does have typically a very urban context. And a lot of the examples cited are, floor area ratio of the total structures, not just residential. It could be commercial, all these other kind of things. And what I would like to explore in relation to concepts is floor area ratio of residential structures. Because when I talk to Ministry of Health and septic systems, and they're sized on the total floor area of the structure or number of bedrooms, they're not looking at the total floor area of all structures on the property. They're just looking at the serviced structures because they're not taking into account, your shops and your barns and all that other kind of stuff. So that's why there's another motion on this agenda, which is asking the province to unlock that funding that we've already gotten so that we can continue to explore this concept. Because talked to a lot of folks locally, and I've talked to some other elected officials from other jurisdictions, and there seems to be an appetite to actually explore this concept further. And I see Reed Bailey from the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yeah, so we have had a development. Maybe we could stick with this recommendation here to further ourselves and just and vote on this matter, and then we can go back to our presentation delegation. Does that work?
Thank you, Chair. If that's what the membership would like to do, I think that's a great plan.
All right, so if no other comments, we'll call the motion for this first part. All those in favor? Great, that's carried, thanks. So we will back up a little bit and go to our delegation. So who exactly do we have? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. We have Reed Bailey, acting team lead. And I believe we have Tom Ozell from province.
Great. Okay. Welcome. I think you may be aware, but I'll just remind everybody, we usually give about 10 minutes. I know it's a lengthy presentation, so we'll try to get you to be as expeditious as possible, and then we'll allow some questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Might be a hair over 10 minutes, but probably not more than 11. So let me just share my screen here so that you can all see the presentation. Just let me know when you can see that.
Almost.
Loading.
Probably loading, yeah.
Yeah, I got the little pinwheel here, so it should be.
There we go. So you're.
I'm going to go to the start here. I think it's on.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, my time's ticking down. So yeah, thanks. I'll be delivering the presentation today on land use planning for agriculture in BC. So just quickly now, I'll talk about why agriculture is important, some pressures on BC's farmland, some tools for local governments, some key actions and messages, and then some discussion. So yeah, first off, why should the province and local governments support agriculture? Well, it is a significant contributor to BC's economy, and the sector is growing. Farm cash receipts increased to over 4.3 billion in 2021. And if you compare that to the oil and gas sector, that was just over 4 billion. So agriculture actually outpaced the oil and gas sector in 2020. And employment figures tell a similar story about the importance of agriculture in our province. In 2022, there were 31,000 people employed in primary agriculture in BC, and compare this versus 17,000 in forestry, which is traditionally viewed as the backbone of BC's economy. And it goes without saying, but food security just more important than ever. And the UN's reported that the global food crisis is only getting worse due to things like our changing climate and global conflicts. And really, it's critical that we produce more and more of our own food. So turning the table now to some pressures on the ALR and farming. It should come as no surprise, but arable land in BC is very limited and under great pressure. 6 of these key pressures, which I'll talk about in turn, are limited arable land, costs of ALR land, urbanization, housing, demographics, and a lack of industrial land. And it's interesting too that these pressures are really nothing new. Almost all these pressures have existed in one form or another for the past 50 or so years, which is a primary reason why the ALR and the ALC was established approximately 50 years ago. The difference now, however, is that many of these pressures are just much more severe than they were back in the 70s. So yes, let's get into those. Limited arable land. Yes. So here's a map of BC on the right. Green shows the ALR land. We have a mix of agricultural capabilities, mix of soil classes throughout the province. You may have heard this stat that 5% of BC's land base is in the ALR. That's technically true, but it's actually quite misleading. For starters, 7% of the ALR base is unavailable for farming. So if you think about a big block of ALR with, let's say, 100 parcels, within that big block, there'll be roads, there'll be rivers, there'll be lakes, there'll be all sorts of features that you can't actually farm. So 7% you can't farm. More concerning is 54% of the ALR. So 54% of the 5% is crown land. And you think of crown land, there's so many competing uses on crown land: mining, forestry, First Nations, recreation. So a lot of land available in the ALR that just can't be farmed. And there is some non-ALR farmland, but it simply does not have the same regulatory protections as that land in the ALR. Moving on now to the cost. Yes, and unfortunately, the cost of farmland in BC just continues to rise. There was an 8% increase in 2022, and that was preceded by an 18.1 increase in 2021. So cultivated land, very expensive in BC. We do have the highest agricultural land values in Canada. The South Coast, for instance, averages $139,000 per acre, which is by far and away the highest cost in Canada. And to give you a comparison, Ontario ranges just from 4 to 28,000 per acre. Interestingly, the largest increase was in the Kootenays. They saw a 33% jump, which is astonishing. And really, it's this increased demand and limited supply, which is contributing to higher values, especially farmland near urban areas. That's seeing a huge competition from things like hobby farming, rural residential lifestyle, and investment properties as well. Third pressure here, urbanization. So as most people are likely aware, I mean, BC is a fantastic place to live. While the exorbitant cost of living is driving some people to move elsewhere, on the whole, our population is growing and not showing any signs of slowing down. Related to urbanization is, more people puts more strain on urban infrastructure. You're likely aware of this. It puts a big strain on local government purse strings. And you have these three areas of significant growth: Lower Mainland, Okanagan, Southern Vancouver Island. In and of itself, there's no real problem with that, but from a farming perspective, there is a problem. These areas are where 80% of the farm receipts in the province are generated. So here's kind of a map there. You can see you guys, Cassette and Sunshine Coast to the south, right adjacent to Metro Vancouver there. So those 7 regional districts, again, 77% of our population lives in there, and 80% of income from farming is generated there. So a lot of people in a small area where there's a lot of farming. So big pressure, big strain. And related to urbanization, of course, is housing demands. Again, everyone knows BC has high housing prices that just keep on going higher. That's both for purchasing a home and for rentals. It's the most unaffordable province in the country for housing. This explains the recent trend of a lot of people from BC moving to Alberta, just looking for cheaper housing. And it's worth noting too that this isn't a Lower Mainland problem anymore. For years and years, the prices in the Lower Mainland were blowing up, and the rest of the province kind of stayed fairly level. Not anymore. 5-10 years ago, everywhere else started to rise, and you're kind of seeing this ripple effect out of Vancouver. You think of people from Vancouver moving into secondary cities like Victoria, Nanaimo, Kelowna, and then people from those cities moving into areas like, let's say, Squamish, and now those people in Squamish are moving to Powell River. I just caught an article on that the other day. So big pressure on Powell River from people getting squeezed out of Squamish. And because of this too, more people are looking at the ALR to solve the housing crisis. And I'm here to tell you that's what we shouldn't be doing. It is called the Agricultural Land Reserve. Put another way, it's land that is reserved for agriculture, and land that might not be suitable for agriculture today or tomorrow or in 10 years. It might be one day. And with changes in technology and the economy and our climate, just because there's a vacant ALR property today does not mean that it won't be a productive farm tomorrow. And something to always keep in mind too is that the ALR, it shouldn't be viewed as the solution to BC's housing crisis, and nor is it the solution to local government housing planning. And I'm not trying to criticize local governments, far from it, absolutely not. What I'm simply saying is that it's just too easy and tempting for people to look at an unused ALR land and say, look, there it is. There's the solution to our housing crisis. And that's really the mindset that we shouldn't have. And as a province and a country, we still have not adopted that build up and not out mantra. It's hasn't been adopted yet to the extent it should be. And it's worth noting too that more people living in the ALR and in rural areas just equals more headaches for everyone, particularly for farmers. There's increased traffic and people driving farther distances. You have people unfamiliar with farming. You have urbanites moving into farming areas. These are the first people to complain when they hear a farmer firing up their tractor in the morning. Puts a lot of strain and stress on the farmer. And more strain on infrastructure, like I mentioned before. Rural areas simply are not equipped to handle larger populations a lot of the times. Fifth pressure, I'm going to whip through this one. Demographics, no surprise here. The average age of a farmer keeps rising in Canada. In BC, the average age now is 57. And depressingly, fewer young people are getting into farming. We only have 1,200 under the age of 35 now. And really, the two biggest reasons are a lack of affordable land and just a general disinterest in a lot of the younger population. Farming is hard work. A lot of people just don't want to do it. Lack of industrial land. Yeah, so this is the big one too. There's a critical shortage of this, particularly in Metro Vancouver. It's resulted in some astronomical prices for industrial land. And because of this, we are seeing a push to convert agricultural land to industrial land, which is something we desperately want to avoid. This was supposed to be animated, and I don't know why my animations aren't working. So this is really jumbled. I'm sorry. I believe a deck was sent around that has this all that looks a lot easier than this. I don't know why the animations are working. Anyhow, this is very, very jumbled, but long and the short of it is through the Local Government Act and the ALC Act, there's a ton of ways where local governments can support support agriculture, developing an agricultural advisory committee or creating an agricultural area plan, having more favorable tax rates for farmers. The ministry also has what we call our minister's bylaw standards. These are standards that we encourage local governments to adopt when updating their zoning bylaws for things like setback distances and size and siting of farm buildings. We also have agricultural land use inventory. So we've surveyed most of the province, the farmland there, and using this data when updating your plans can be very beneficial. If you're unaware too, the ALC has some great policies and bulletins that really explain the legislation, because that's often very confusing. So that's a good spot to go to as well for some updated information. Really, I'm not going to talk about these. I only have a minute left, so I'm just going to whip off to the key actions here. Really, you can help BC farmers succeed by reducing burdens within your control. I know I just glazed over a bunch of that, but there are things local governments can do. One of them is creating stronger buffers between farmland and other uses. The old saying, good fences really do make good neighbors. Coordinating with your local government neighbors to enact bylaws that are similar and easy to understand and consistent is always a good plan. And recognize that non-farm uses in the ALR really do have an impact on the ALR, a cumulative impact. So there I am. I'm out of breath, but I did it. I have 16 seconds there. I feel like I haven't talked that fast in my entire life, but
we do allow a little latitude, but thank you for timely on that.
I know I need some water now.
Yes, so you have your water. Just a comment from me that as a non-farmer, and I've always had questions around ALR before this job. I think it does put it into perspective. Some very interesting figures and facts on the impact on our economy and where those population centers were. I was just returned from Cranbrook yesterday after a week working up there, and I got a chance to drive around on my time away from work, and you can see how the that limited supply of arable land or other uses of farming, cattle and that sort of thing, and it's all jammed into a pretty small area. So it really makes it relevant for me. But I'm going to open it up for questions from the directors. Director Gisborne.
I was going to ask if any of our agricultural advisory committee members wanted to ask first.
Yes, I don't know if we have anybody. Do we have anybody in the crowd? Awesome, great. You can stand up, maybe introduce yourself and just ask your question.
Well, I don't have a question.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I will introduce myself. I'm Dave Murphy. I'm the chair of the Agricultural Advisory Committee.
Great.
And I want to thank Mr. Reid there for his presentation. I have a few ideas, but no questions at the moment.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
But could you make an introduction of, because I'm not sure if I know everybody sitting at the table there.
Okay.
So, I know that.
Well, I'll just start with myself. I'm the chair of the planning committee. I'm Director Lennox from Area A, which is north of Tlalonan.
Yeah. Clay Brander, Director Area C, down south.
Okay.
I'm George Dudd. I'm a municipal director, and I don't have a vote on the planning committee, but I'm always interested to see what's going on.
Sandy?
Yeah. Good. And?
Mark Gisborne, Area B.
Mr. Gisborne.
You know me.
Thank you.
Good. So thanks for that. We'll go to Director Gisborne and then Director McCall.
Sure. So thank you for your presentation. A lot of good information, but also some very concerning figures that are showing up. Lack of young people getting involved in farming is one that I find very concerning. But I'm also glad that you're here and that I'm here as well, because I'm under 40 and I am a farmer and I am on ALR. So
you're breaking the curve there.
Yeah. When I look at farming, I kind of see it a little like fire. Fire needs three things: heat, fuel, and oxygen. Without any of those three, the fire dies. Farming I see as it needs soil, it needs water, and you need labor. Without one of those three, the farm doesn't work. So I'm going to break my questions down into the three categories. The first one is the land, which I know the ALR is very focused on, is soil quality. Now, your slide pointed out that 54% of the ALR is crown land.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how we can unlock that so that way we can get some more agricultural production in our communities? Because I know that there's some crown land in our region that is ALR, and like could the regional district buy it? Like, because otherwise it's sitting there not doing any kind of food production.
Yeah, I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. It's really agriculture on Crown land often gets kind of kicked down the rung. The priorities often seem to be things, again, like mining, forestry, recreation, so on and so forth. And it's almost impossible to like get a piece of fee simple Crown land and make a farm these days. Like it's very, very challenging, if not, again, impossible. You can approach a province. It's a challenging process. It's not to say you can't do it, but there are big hurdles.
Okay. Thanks for giving me that straight, very real answer. I know we all hope for something a little better, but
yeah,
bit of a challenge. Second one is water, and I noticed in one of your slides you mentioned about irrigation. You know, local governments could support irrigation systems. Now, as you know, water systems come with a great deal of cost. Do you know of any funding that can come from the province to help create these systems? Because, well, one of the challenges with doing an irrigation system is they're quite expensive. And if you're doing it to service agricultural land, and you know, half of it's Crown land, so it doesn't make any points.
Because I'm just going to stick to the question, right, so that we can kind of move ahead. I totally get the preamble. That was good, but maybe
how do we get money?
That's a good question. That's a great question.
I'm going to pass it on to Tom. Tom, if you don't mind answering that, you're more on that side of things than I am. If you're there and able to speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, Reed. I haven't introduced myself today. I'm Tom O'Dell, regional agrologist for North Vancouver Island and certain other areas, including Coffet Regional District. And I will say there are a couple of programs open right now. And in terms of the regional district supporting water infrastructure, there is a program that's open right now for funding applications for planning and design of agricultural water infrastructure. And if you want more details on that, please provide a contact and I will give you links or follow up with a phone call with more information. There are also, for individual farms, it's a different level, but there's support for that as well through the Environmental Farm Program. And I could give you more information about that. Or we could arrange a chat with more details and go into more depth on this topic. Glad to help out. That's my job.
Okay, that's a great answer. I think we can have our staff contact you to receive that information. Is that appropriate? Do we need a motion for that, or?
I think I would ask the CEO of that.
Do we need a motion to receive that correspondence?
Which correspondence?
Just the information here, the links and contacts for these particular programs for the water.
This?
Nope. Sorry, I think
that we can
handle that?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I don't think we
don't want to make it too formal. Thanks. Do we have any other questions? Actually, Director McCormick was next, so yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Director Lennox. My question comes from a session that I attended at UBCM last September. My question relates to farm, what designates a farm under the provincial law. The session that I went to was put on by the Craft Cannabis Association. Being from Texada, it's a topic of local interest. And so I attended and was told that producers who are growing, under license or whatever their thing is, they're not recognized for farm status. And one of the challenges they face is, putting their eggs in that basket, so to speak, in agricultural production. They're not recognized for doing that by the government. So they're kind of caught in never land, a bit like improvement districts and water systems that way. But I'm just wondering, do you have, a way to address that?
Yeah.
Sorry, just before you answer, sorry to cut in, just a point of order. We're beyond our normal time here, but if all the directors agree, we're going to extend our time here for another 10 minutes. We've got several folks that want to ask questions, which is good. Thanks. Maybe you can answer. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, not to tip my hand, but government is very much aware of that. And there is progress being made on adding cannabis as a designated farm use under the BC Assessment Act in order for cannabis producers to qualify for BC farm tax class status, which would, yes, it would give them tax advantages. So that's being explored. A lot of work's being done. The announcement's actually going to probably happen reasonably soon. It's been on the back burner for a long time.
Awesome.
Timely question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Before we carry on with questions, Ms. Rodden, you wanted to interject, and then we'll move on to some questions.
Oh,
Gotcha.
I had a question.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to add you to the list. So, Mr. Murphy, maybe we could ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. This one is for Reed Bailey. Let's see how to put this. I understand that there's a moratorium on applications going to the Crown for farms to apply for grazing rights or access to provincial agricultural lands. And I'm wondering whether that's going to be lifted soon. Or what's
I'm not aware of that. I know like a lot of ranches are supported by grazing leases on Crown land. None of those have been impacted as far as I know. Tom, do you have any information on that?
Existing licenses, but for new licenses, yes.
I haven't heard anything in that regard. We do not have many Crown tenures in this part of the province, but I haven't heard that there's any moratorium on applications.
So it sounds like it's very area specific. So maybe there's somebody else in the ministry that would have some details on that. Mr. Murphy could follow up with. Okay, maybe we should.
Absolutely, please reach out to me, and I'll track down the right person for you to talk to.
Odell, okay, could you leave your contact information, please?
Will do.
Thank you, Mr. Odell. Okay, next question is Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. Around here, I imagine it's kind of similar elsewhere. We have a lot of ALR land that's not being used for agricultural purposes. And I was wondering if there's any steps being taken to incentivize it or even potentially penalize people who do not use ALR land for agriculture?
Yeah, it's an interesting question that's been bubbling up lately as, yes, kind of similar to the vacant home tax. There's municipalities that are proposing something like a vacant agricultural tax and doing more punitive measures that way. But again, actually similar to the adding the cannabis as to the farm class designation, we know there's a problem with the farm tax system on the province. It hasn't been updated for about 30 years. That it's not working for a variety of reasons right now. And we have a team that crosses about 3 ministries, and we are taking steps to review farm tax classification in the ALR to make it more advantageous to farm in the ALR and giving additional breaks to those who are actually farming. So that's something we are exploring. That one still a ways away from any kind of public announcement, but work in the background on that is being done because there is a lot of vacant land that should be in production.
Good, thank you.
Ms. Rodden.
Thank you. I'm Laura Rodden, manager of planning services.
Yeah, hi Laura.
Regional District, hi. My question relates to the slide on tools in the toolbox. And
yes.
How that Regional District staff and Agricultural Advisory Committee did work with the ministry on an agricultural land use inventory for our region back in 2020. It was completed. And I still can't find that available online. Other regional district inventories are available online, and I'm just wondering when that will be available, because it has a lot of important and useful information for reports and plans, and also to raise awareness in the community.
Yeah, great question. And a bit of background. So our ALUI team about 6 or 7 years ago stopped publishing reports for each area that they conducted ALUI surveys on. It was just too labor intensive. It took way too much time. So what they're actually working on is a public facing, kind of like a web interface where you can go and actually look at the information yourself. And they've demoed it to me, and I'm very I'm terrible at technology, and even I understood it. It's really incredible, the information that's being displayed. So that is coming down the pipe. It was supposed to be done about a year ago, but there's backups to COVID and all this. But anyhow, this public interface is coming out, and it will have that info. But Laura, too, if you do want to connect with me, I can connect you with our ALUI team to get that information to you. It won't be in report form. It'll be more spreadsheet form, but the information can be delivered.
That would be great. I think ideally, though, it should be available online because.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, we're well aware of that. Yeah, big time.
Okay, well, Director Gisborne will give you one more kick of the cat.
Okay. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Of the three things that are needed for farming, I asked questions on land, water. Third one is labor.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is becoming probably the biggest challenge we're seeing in the rural lands and the ALR. And it shows there with lack of young people getting into farming.
Yeah.
As a young farmer, the big barriers we see is you need to buy a house, you need to buy land, and then you're buying a business. If you're a young family, you want to have kids, well, there's no childcare. You don't get all the supports that you get when you go out and work for an actual business. So we tend to need to be a little bit more flexible in the rural areas and on the farms to try and, partner people up. Okay, I need some extra laborers. I need someone to look after the childcare. And that's where trying to get the laborers on the farm becomes very important. And right now, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you are allowed one principal dwelling up to 5,000 square feet and a secondary suite for 950 square feet. Is that correct?
Somewhat. You're allowed a principal dwelling up to 500 square meters or approximately 5,000 square feet. Within that principal, you can have a secondary suite, and then you can have an additional residence up to 90 square meters.
Okay.
Yes. So 3 housing units on all ALR properties.
Okay, so you can have the secondary suite within the primary, and then you can have one that's detached.
That's right.
So one of the questions that folks ask me is, well, say someone's out in a rural area and they want to have 2 dwellings, 1,000 square feet each.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that's not allowed.
That's right.
But yet you can have 1 dwelling, 5,000 square feet, and then have another 950. Now, the farmers, they turn to me and they go, how does that make sense? We want to protect the land, but yet you can have a bigger house rather than having 2 smaller units. Because we've got a lot of agricultural activities in our region that are a bunch of small units. They're co-ops. I think there's Herstones, there's Blueberry Commons, but they keep telling me we couldn't do these operations on the ALR. And what we're seeing is land that is not ALR is being farmed because they can access the labor.
Well, Director Gisborne, I'm gonna cut in because I think there is a good question here just to kind of sum it up. What's the mechanism for us to affect change in that area, if any?
Well, I mean, if you would want 1,000 square 1,000 square foot houses, it's just an application to the ALC. Like, that's the quick and short answer to it. The regulation is likely not being changed regarding housing in the next little while. It was just changed a few years ago, and I think the ministry overall seems to be relatively content with it.
Okay, so it sounds like more advocacy at all levels if we want to change that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, well, and thank you for your presentation. Obviously, a lot of good discussion, right? A lot of people had some great questions. So
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Sorry for the jumbled slides there. I don't know what was going on. Yeah, but
thank you very much.
Okay, take care. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, I think we're moving back to 5.1.2. There you go. So we have a recommendation here, multifaceted, a recommendation to pass a motion here. Whereas the BC Ministry of Housing Capacity Fund can only be used for local governments to meet the legislative requirements in Bill 44 and 46. And whereas the QRD has met the provincial government's requirements related to our OCP and zoning bylaw reforms, or the government's, provincial governments. And that the Cathet Regional District is seeking to pursue greater residential flexibility options. We've talked about that. And finally, that the Cathay Regional District requests that the Minister of Housing expand those parameters of the Housing Capacity Fund to allow for consultation and engagement for the purposes of OC density reforms related to lot coverage and floor area ratios.
I'll second.
Okay, do we have a mover? Okay. Do we have a seconder? I'll second that. Okay, discussion. Director Gisborne.
No, just to clarify, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe that there is still a requirement that needs to be met in relation to the OCP around population projections and the housing projections. That's work that I think is still being done, the housing needs assessment. But the purpose of this motion is to ask for greater flexibility from the Ministry of Housing, because I don't think what still needs to be done will cost the amount of money that we have sitting in the bank. And what I've heard at the Housing Summit was that there is plans to release more funding in the next 2 years as well. So I'm not sure what else the province is planning to throw at us. There's also been a lot of talk amongst electoral area directors that when it comes to housing, the province is kind of making it up as they go. And I would like to be progressive in this matter around residential flexibility, because it also aligns with our strategic plan. And I think this work can be done for a reasonable expense. And I'd also just like to mention that at our Electoral Area Directors Forum at ABICC, we had a presentation brought in by Donna McMahon of Tamara Trauchenko, who was a professor or is a professor at UVic. And she said a lot of this kind of work, she has graduate students, and they are very keen to be engaged in this kind of thing. And at that session, I asked if she'd be interested in maybe working on something like that with us. And she said that that would be something absolutely right up her alley. So I think this motion is fine, because it just is asking the province to give us flexibility so that we can promote flexibility.
Thank you. And I'll add my voice. I was at that same session, and there does seem to be some resources there that we can use and leverage. And I actually appreciate the way that this recommendation is laid out, because it is about flexibility. And interestingly, a lot of people know our region has a lot of flexibility, but we're also at the forefront of the new times around housing demands and what those potential solutions could be. And it is good to have a fulsome understanding of when you make a decision one way or the other. And I really appreciate staff's report. I had to read it a few times because it's lengthy, but just the comparisons about why other areas are doing OCP amendments related to FAR, and that it was good education for me. Director Brenner.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I do understand the concept of the floor area ratio and lot coverage, and how it could be a valuable tool in urban settings primarily. We're not dealing with urban settings, and I understand how it could be used in rural settings as well. But I really appreciated the report included the description of the OCPs as being guides for development, and they're not enforceable documents. So floor area ratio is usually used where enforceable zoning bylaws are already in place. And I don't see a point in using staff time or taxpayer money making the change to floor area ratio, especially as most of the land in the electoral areas is not affected by zoning bylaws. So enforcement of any changes would not be possible anyways. We don't have bylaws restricting a lot of things already. And if we change this, we still don't have bylaws to enforce it. So I don't see it until zoning bylaws are in place. I don't see a point in spending staff time or taxpayer money on it.
Okay. Give you an opportunity, Chairman McCormick. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I want to understand now. We have this fund that's set to be used for a certain purpose, but we don't need it for that purpose. So we want permission to use it for something else. Am I understanding that correctly? So my first question to staff then is, what other funding sources are there out there that could accommodate the work that is being contemplated here? Are there other funding sources out there? That's, yeah.
I think I understand the question. Maybe Ms. Rodden is the first point of information there. Are you aware of any other?
Tax requisition. I mean, you could budget to do the work in next year or following years. But there's no other grants for that type of work. It's part of bylaw amendment process or bylaw development process.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm not then convinced that there's something broken that needs to be fixed by doing this work and involving staff and a lot of money to explore something that isn't broken. So I guess I'm not in favor of that. But my final question is regarding the general concept of this motion, because it's really something that would apply province-wide. Would it not be appropriate, Chair, for this to go, say, to UBCM for consideration?
Yeah, and I have thought about it too, because it's like I said, we're at the forefront of this, but you would think that people would want flexibility in other regions.
And us asking for something as one regional district is, not the same impact as UBCM asking for something.
Well, I guess that, sorry to interrupt, but I guess that final section under that is how do we request the ministry, right? Is what mechanism, whether it's UBCM or other. Any other? Yeah, Director Gisborne.
Yeah. The deadline for submitting resolutions to UBCM or requesting meetings with ministry staff or with the minister is later on in June. So today is our last board meeting before that deadline. So if we want to put forward any resolutions in relation to housing and land use flexibility, today is the day. So that's why I put this motion forward. And it's not about changing land use plans in other regional districts and other jurisdictions. I read a recent response of the secondary suite incentive program. For some reason, we didn't get the letter, but other regional districts did. And the province response was they also realize that it doesn't just not apply to some regional district, it also doesn't apply to some municipalities too. And the province is coming out with these funding programs and they're coming out with these changes. And then they are realizing that, oh, wait, this works for the Lower Mainland, but it doesn't work for other parts of the province. And when it comes to housing and residential flexibility in the rural areas, for our region, we are in a unique situation. We are one of the 11 or 12 regional districts that don't have building permits throughout our area. And I would say that that is actually a benefit. To Director Brander's point of, we don't have the zoning bylaws, I would contend that Area B has 3 zoning bylaws. And some of you might recall, a number of years ago, I brought up the issue that the Nootka Street zoning bylaw has 1 dwelling per hectare. I wanted to change that to a floor area ratio or lot coverage model after a lot of good conversation with members of the public up there. I was informed at the time that, well, we can't change the zoning bylaw, we got to change the OCP first. I brought forward a resolution to change the OCP, and the idea was then, well, let's actually get a staff report on what floor area ratio and lot coverage is and how that would affect, the entire region. So we've done that. And I am hearing concerns in the community where they say, well, I can have 1 dwelling. It can be 5,000 square feet. It can be 10,000 square feet, but I'm not allowed to have a granny cabin. And as a young person who is seeing the housing crisis, and we're seeing in our housing needs assessment that people are overhoused because when a developer says, well, I can only build 1 house, I'll build it as big as I can. Whereas in the areas where we don't have those zoning bylaws, because we do have them, in the areas that they don't, folks are going, well, my septic system is sized for so many square feet. I would like a granny cabin for, my cousin and this for my aunt. And what you're seeing is people are dealing with their own housing challenges because they have that flexibility, because they haven't been regulated. And I would contend with Director McCormick's point of, well, it's not broken. The R1 zoning system is broken. And that has been proven across North America. And that's why the province is removing it from urban areas by saying minimum is now 4 or 6 or 20, but that's for the urban context. And when we talk about the rural context, the province doesn't even seem to know what we are or where we are. And that's why we can either be leaders, we can ask for permission to use the money that we already have in the bank to do this work. We can work with the professors, we can work with the graduate students, and we can chart our own course, or we can just get dragged behind by whatever the province dreams up based on what they see in the Lower Mainland.
CAO, I think so. Again?
Yes, please. Through the chair, question to Director Gisborne. should this motion pass, what is the vision that you have of the pathway that this motion takes?
Very good question. My first, if this motion passes, would be that we would then meet with the Minister of Housing or their staff, if the minister is not available, to ask for the flexibility for that grant that is already sitting in the bank account to explore lot coverage and floor area ratios and come up with a framework that we could then take to the public, and that we could use that funding from the Ministry of Housing. But if the ministry says, no, we're not going to allow you to use the money in that way, well, then it's got to come back to us to go, hey, what are we going to do?
Yes, please, through the chair. For certainty then, your intention with this is for it to be directed to the UBCM convention.
Yes, the UBCM convention for meeting with staff and ministers.
And that is good to know, because our timing is so appropriate officer.
So this is to direct staff to have a meeting or book a meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Amendment. You understand the intent. So I guess that is the question.
Chair, that would substantially change the motion that's written in here, because the motion in here says that we are requesting the Minister of Housing, to expand their parameters. It doesn't say anything about UBCM or the meeting.
Dr. Gisborne, do you have an amendment that you feel comfortable with?
Yes, put forward an amendment. That'd be at the UBCM. I'll pull up our board meeting later today. It would be on that agenda, similar language, meeting with the ministry at the UBCM convention.
Okay. Need to write that up for the committee.
Yes, so sorry, this would be, so that currently the motion is that the committee recommends to the board that the board pass the following motion. And then, but we're wanting to provide direction to staff. So we just have to look at how we're going to insert that language.
Yeah.
Through the chair, perhaps if this motion passes, we could get a subsequent standalone motion of the direction for staff to action that item.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Everybody understand? We'll vote on this and then we'll vote on it. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at our board meeting later today, and under 8.7, UBCM convention attendance and meetings with premier and cabinet ministers, item number 4, that the board directs staff to schedule a meeting with the Honorable Ravi Colvin, Minister of Housing, regarding consideration of capacity funding grant flexibility.
Maybe after this.
That covers it. So
I'm just going to add my second round of comments on this particular motion. And I appreciate the other directors' comments. I guess that the report, again, I read it a few times and I'll be reading it again, does make me think about density in a bit of a different way. I have Lund, which obviously is going to have its own considerations as we move ahead with everything, water, sewer, the density concerns there. And Savary's OCP has some good points raised there about, again, different mechanisms, different tools that I think we're, maybe in isolation or maybe for an area, may need to be considered. So for me, I'd like to get the work done again, because we're going to be trying to nail this down with as much information as possible in the coming year or two here. So, yes, Director.
I usually keep my aura and stuff like that. But this regional district is in somewhat of a unique situation. We have funds to change building and zoning bylaws from the provincial government if it needs to be changed. We're in the situation of not having very many of those building and zoning bylaws and have actually limited use for the funds. And what Director Gisborne's proposing is a different direction, and looking in a different direction that others may not have thought about, but may benefit other people. And we're simply looking at turning that money that's been given to us by the province into something that's useful, even for a small number of zoning bylaws. And if I had a vote, I'd be in favor of it, because we're simply asking the Ministry of Housing to expand the uses for that one bunch of money, and writing a letter to the minister and meeting with them at the UBCM, a few distinct ways to do that. And hopefully they'll listen and say, you know, here's a unique use of that money, rather than see it sit in a suspense account for 1 or 2 years and then have to be sent back to the provincial government.
Thank you. I saw the next hand was Director McCormick, then Director Rod, and then Director Brander.
Thank you, Chair. So there's 2 issues here. One is expanding the parameters, which, yeah, I see the benefit of that. But 2, expanding them to include this particular thing. I'm not convinced that we want to explore lot coverage because I don't see the benefit. Yes, it would be more information, sure, great, but does that put us further ahead? Is there a positive result as a result of going that route? So I'm not convinced that that's the way to spend it. So if this motion were simply about asking the minister to expand the parameters for the use of this fund, because each local government would have a different type of use for it, no doubt, that I can support. But as it is written, for this one purpose, I'm not willing to say I want it just for this one purpose. I want it, the parameters expanded, period. And this one purpose may fall into a catchment of other purposes. So that's where I stand, Chair. And as it is, I cannot support the motion on the table.
Okay, Ms. Rod was next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, through the chair, I just wanted to caution that the regional district has received $124,000 through this capacity fund. And we don't know yet the cost of the work that's required and the work that would be strategically advantageous to help us increase housing supply. So we brought a report for it in April. We flagged that we were going to need to complete an updated housing needs report that gave 20-year population projections and housing needs. We need to amend the development procedures bylaw and the public hearing policy to reflect all of the public hearing notification requirements. And then the other strategically important work, this was mentioned in the April report on the new legislation and in the report on the agenda today, that you know, completing build out modeling and growth analysis. So we don't have that for our region. And a lot of other jurisdictions now are doing this work to help inform where the growth areas are, where the demand is. And if we look at our current housing needs report, the growth is in Area A. That's where the highest percentage of growth over the last 5 years has happened. And Area A has Lund, and Lund is the only growth area recognized in any of our official community plans because there is a sewer system. And the province and the regulations dictate that the higher densities can only be accommodated in areas where local governments deliver a sewer service that can accommodate higher density growth. So the other 3 items that are strategically important in our region are in Lund, doing long-term infrastructure planning to support and identify whether we can accommodate growth in Lund, and amending our development cost charge in Lund for the sewer service to reflect what those costs are going to be to accommodate that long-term growth. We may be taking on the water service. We'll need also need a bylaw to support that. And we may want to consider the development of amenity cost charge bylaw. So these are all tools in Bill 47, and they were discussed in the April report. These are the strategic items, and to do all of those things is going to cost more than $124,000. So, I mean, I did say in April report that I would be bringing forward a report in the future once we had the requirements clarified for the housing needs report. Then we can put out an RFP for that work, and we will know what we have left in the budget from 124. But then there's going to need to be some decisions made by the board on what you want to spend the remainder on. So in my opinion, this is premature, and I don't understand how engaging on floor area ratio is going to increase housing supply, because the constraint on density in our region is we don't have sewer servicing. So we need to have the infrastructure to support that. And that's what Bill 46 and 47 are about, our smart growth and encouraging development in growth areas where we have sustainable infrastructure to support that growth over time. And there's a lot of work to do to get there, and it costs money. So I just caution the directors that, you know, that is in the offing, and planning to do something that I don't understand. I'm a professional part. I don't understand how exploring floor area ratio in OCPs is going to increase housing supply.
Okay, I think you were next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Ms. Rodden actually just pretty much answered my question. The concept of this being money that's going to be sitting in a bank account and then we'll have to send it back just doesn't exist. We've got lots of things to spend this money on. A lot of things that I think are important to our region. So I don't see a point in going down this path right now. Thanks.
Okay, Director Gisborne, last shot here.
We have $120,000 in the bank this year. At the Housing Summit, like I said, they're planning to release similar funding next year and the year after that. So then my question will be, what's the plan to do with the next $120,000 and the next $120,000 after that? On top of that, I have to disagree with our planner that density can only be achieved with local government sewer and water systems. Because in my neck of the woods, that's actually not true. Private properties put in their own septic systems, they put in their own water systems. What is it? 3 properties away from you, they got 40 addresses. It's not ALR. I've talked to the property owner and they go, well, Ministry of Health says that if we put in our sewer system that complies with Ministry of Health regulations, they can proceed. If you're going to have more than one dwelling unit on one source of water, you need to have a water system. That's achievable by a private property owner. There are lots of properties in the electoral areas that have more than the one dwelling per hectare. Some of them have motorhomes, some of them have tiny cabins. And what we're seeing is in the areas that don't have the zoning bylaws, they're looking at our density provisions and they're going, well, that's not realistic for me on my property, so they're ignoring the guideline. And when people are just across the board ignoring the guidelines, why even have them? This motion is saying, hey, give us the flexibility because we're going to get more money next year. We're going to get money after that and the year following. And floor area ratio has been proven in other countries to actually increase residential flexibility, lower the cost of housing, and to allow young people to live in the community. So no, we don't need a regional district sewer system to see increased density in the rural area because private property owners are doing it. I know that because I'm one of them, and I've been talking to the health inspectors. You can have additional dwellings on a private sewer system. I don't know where this regulation is that is mentioned in the staff report that says the province says no to it. Because then I asked the health inspector and they go, no, you can have additional dwellings. It's just you got to comply with the Ministry of Health rules and regulations. Has to be a licensed and approved septic installer. It's got to be a water system. So this motion is very simple, asking for the flexibility. And I'd be happy to amend it to be more in line with the motion that's on our board agenda, which is that we schedule a meeting with the minister regarding consideration of capacity funding grant flexibility. And therefore, Director McCormick, who has any other ideas around how to achieve this flexibility in the rural areas, can be added to that discussion. And I would excitedly await any other ideas. Because all I can find is right now we use the number of dwellings per hectare, and the public goes a 10,000 square foot house is not the same as a 500 square foot granny cabin, but the Nootka Street zoning bylaw doesn't see the difference.
So, you know, go ahead, Director.
I'll move to call the previous question.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna say the same thing. So we have a seconder, Director Brander. Okay, we're gonna call the question here, 5.1.2.
We're gonna call the question on calling the question.
Right, thank you. On calling the question. All those in favor? Okay, we are gonna call the question. That was 3-1, right? All those opposed, thank you. So 3-1. So we'll call the question 5.1.2. All those in favor? That's 2 in favor. All those opposed, 2 opposed. So
Fails.
the motion fails. Okay. Take some notes here. Stay organized if I can. All right, the next order of business. We have correspondence here. I think you all have it in your package. Is there any business arising from this correspondence from anyone?
I have a question.
Okay.
It's a question to our staff. When it comes to hunting regulations, is that really even regional district jurisdiction, or is that my understanding is it's almost entirely provincial?
Which one of our staffs is best to answer that one, I wonder? Ms. Rodden?
Chair, that's provincial.
Okay, thank you, Director McCormick.
Yeah, so I think, you know, really all we can do is suggest that they contact conservation about the violations that they've, you know, witnessed, and they should keep that number handy so when they happen, they can call right away. I see that as the appropriate response. So I don't really see any action coming out of the correspondence unless we want to write a letter advising them to contact conservation, which.
And thank you for that. And I thank you, Ms. Rowan, for your comment. I think we're well aware we have no jurisdiction here. The point that I'm taking from this is that Savary Islanders are very engaged, and they're paying attention to, you know, current conditions, and they've identified an issue for them. So I guess what I would commit to doing, the business for me, is to support them to get the right agencies involved and figure out what the island wants and go from there. So Director Binder.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering, a question for staff, actually. It would be more appropriate for us to make a motion to write a letter, or can we just ask staff to contact the letter writers?
Public communication and engagement policy 2.9 does address information sharing under section 2, and that does provide authority for staff to provide some basic information.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for that, Director. Did I see another hand? Director McCormick?
Yeah, no, just sort of going down that same road.
Yeah, how do we
let them know? But you know, when you drive onto Texada, there's a big sign that says the RAP line, RAPP, report all poachers and polluters. And that sign perhaps should be erected on Savary, you know, as well, so that people know what to do when this happens. You want a response now, not
exactly.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's just interesting the history behind these things, and just of note for folks listening that Savary was actually added back into the hunting regulations in the 90s for shot cartridges. Very interesting, right? So obviously there was some advocacy, and we'll help our community with that one. Thanks. We'll move on. Reports, we've got our first report is 8.1. Just checking my notes here. It's a lengthy application here in my area, Emmonds Road. We need to read it, or can I actually move the recommendation? Thank you, Director Brander. Do I have a second? Director McCormick, comments? Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting, especially with the presentation that we just had from the Ministry of Agriculture, outlining, you know, the increased desire to protect agricultural land. And they also expressed some of the concerns around land that's not in the ALR, but is still registered as agriculture, and that it's being kind of primed for development. So this land in question is designated as agricultural land And I do know that it has a history of farming because a number of years ago, I got my cows from there. I don't want to say I'm opposed to this subdivision, but I think it should go through a similar channel, which is, I think it should be referred to our Agricultural Advisory Committee for comment and some oversight, because that kind of seems to tie into what the Ministry of Agriculture presentation was this morning. So I would actually move to refer this item to the Agricultural Advisory Committee.
Okay, maybe before we have a motion, Ms. Roberts, let's see. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm gonna come sit here. Yeah, so through the chair, so if you look, sorry, just gotta
Okay.
get myself organized. So the agricultural land reserve only covers part of the parcel, which you can see on Appendix B.
Page 9 of 20 in the report, I think is.
Yeah, it's page 63. So there is no subdivision within the ALR. The boundary of the ALR is going to be the boundary of the parcel. So we did receive confirmation that this doesn't have to go to the ALC. We do not need their permission. So I just wanted to like that and clarify that.
Any other questions from Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify, I didn't say it was in the ALR, and I didn't say it should go to the ALC. I said it should go to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, and that the land is designated agricultural in the OCP. So,
Yep.
Yes, so thank you, Chair. Just at this point, we have a motion,
Yep.
a mover, and you might want to ask if there's a seconder, and if not, then.
All right, seconder for the motion. I'll second it for discussion.
The motion to refer?
The AC. Oh, yeah, you're that one. He did. I asked for a little bit of details, but so, yeah, go ahead, Director.
yeah, very simple. Yeah, it's just because we've had the presentation from the Ministry of Agriculture. The land is not ALR, but for lands that are designated agricultural in the OCP, I think that our Agricultural Advisory Committee might have some good comments or some good insight. And I know the subdivision process is not a quick process, even if everything flies through the regional district, because Ministry of Transportation still takes their time. And I guess my one question would be, do you know when the next meeting for the Agricultural Advisory Committee is?
I do not.
Through the chair, no, we haven't received any applications from the ALC, so we haven't scheduled any ALC meeting.
Okay. Just for my clarity, the committee is only scheduled as needed, or so they don't meet regularly? Is that Ms. Rod?
That's
because I don't know.
In the terms of reference, the committee is to meet twice a year.
Okay.
Or as required. And we've had no ALC applications to be reviewed. So the committee hasn't met as yet this year, but that doesn't mean we won't meet. And it doesn't mean if the committee so desires, you could refer it to committee and then we would schedule them.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions, Director McCormick?
I guess among my questions, is it typical to refer, you know, a proposed conventional 2-lot subdivision, pretty straightforward, meets the OCP size and all that? You know, is that conventional for us to refer that to the Agricultural Advisory Committee? I mean, agriculture is part of the picture, but it's not the only equation, part of the, you know.
Sure, I think I understand your question. My answer is I haven't been through it enough to know if that's a regular thing, but I think we get to decide in each case too, Ms. Rodden.
Perhaps,
sorry.
yes.
The terms of reference specify that the committee needs to, part of the mandate is to review applications to the Agricultural Land Commission that are referred. So it doesn't capture subdivisions in general. However, the mandate also says that the board can refer matters relevant or something to agriculture. So I think it's, you've got the
latitude.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks. And I'll just add my comments as I watch this property change, having grown up here, and you know, I understand the application and it doesn't appear to affect the ALC, but my conscience tells me to involve our committees when we can, because they've been around longer and they're looking at different things, and then they have the benefit of watching things unfold as well. So I'm in support of referring it to the committee. I agree with Director Gisborne. Things don't move fast anyways, and our committee, I think, would appreciate some consultation. But Director McCormick, I saw you again.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. So is there any time sensitivity to providing a response? That would be a question to staff. Sure.
Right now, the deadline for this one to respond is July 3rd to respond to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, but we can ask for extensions. However, I believe this was an extension.
Yes, we
already asked for one.
Okay, so we've already asked for one. Is there a likelihood that if we asked for another, that would be granted?
They have been flexible, sorry, through the chair. They have been flexible, however, it really depends. It's case by case.
Right.
Crystal ball.
Sorry, I'll go with Director Browner first in case it adds to this. Go ahead.
I was just gonna put my 2 cents in that I don't see the point in sending it to the AAC because it is just a conventional subdivision. It meets all of the requirements, and just out of courtesy for the homeowners, the property owners, to ask for more delays and more extensions when I can't imagine that anything that would come out of the AAC would hinder me from allowing this to go through. So I would prefer to expedite it. Thank you.
I think I saw Director McCormick, or that was your second one, right? Oh, Ms. Rodden, sorry.
Through the chair, yeah, just a caution as well that if this were to be referred to the Ag Advisory Committee, this is the busiest time of year for the farmers. And those that are members of the committee have continually said they don't want summer meetings. So
For me too.
I think it would be challenging to call a meeting and get quorum.
Okay. Your comment? Director Gisborne, I think you get your second kick of the can on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to point out that on the provincial government's website, it's like I just missed it. I just had the line in front of me and I pushed refresh. Anyways, the point of agricultural advisory committees is to comment on agricultural activities that are in the jurisdiction of local government and regional districts. So while this is not an agricultural land reserve property, it is an agricultural property. I know that the scheduled meeting, I think, is October and November. However, we did just have a presentation from the Ministry of Agriculture. The chair was here, and I would suspect that there might be some interest from the other members to meet and kind of discuss what was recently presented, because I believe that there's also going to be a presentation to City Council from for the Ministry of Agriculture as well. Whatever way the wind goes.
Okay, one more, Director McCall.
Yeah, just to say that I don't support referring it because this is not an ALR issue. And if we start referring non-ALR issues to them, I think it dilutes the whole point of having that agricultural expertise providing us with advice on agriculture. So yeah, if this was ALR land, I could see that, but no, I think it would set a dangerous precedent.
Okay. We're going to call the question. All those in favor? All opposed? So that's 2 opposed and 2 for. The motion is approved. All right, back to the main motion. So I think we understand the intent of this motion. It does have 2 subjects: proof of water and septic servicing, meeting provincial standards, and a qualified environmental professional to complete a riparian area assessment. Enter into section 219 covenant with the QRD to ensure protection of streamside protection and enhancement areas in that report. And so I'll make that motion.
It's already moved.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. We're already there. I'm thinking about something else already. So any discussion on this matter, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, just a real simple question. When I take a look at the site map, it has a riparian area in the middle of the property, because it looks like there's a body of water there. However, when I take a look at the actual map, it looks like there's multiple bodies of water. So like, just north of that circle riparian area, I see another body of water. So I'm just wondering, why is there only one riparian area and not the other ones?
Okay, maybe Ms. Roberts, you understand the question? Is this 9 of 20 on page 9 of 20?
Which page are you looking?
I am looking at page 11 of 20. The development permit area 1 riparian areas.
Are you looking at the, sorry, through the chair, are you looking at the yellow highlighted?
Oh, no, the green, and then, so there's that riparian, and then there's a flood as well.
Yes, so through the chair, so sometimes the water data in our mapping system isn't 100% accurate. But the intent of the riparian area assessment report is that it'll identify the exact areas and then the streamside protection enhancement area. So it will ground truth this, and it will identify where the riparian areas actually are. And then we'll ask for a section 219 covenant for the areas.
Okay, so what you're saying is the final kind of approval or map of riparian areas won't necessarily be the same as what's in the staff report.
Exactly, through the chair. Yes, it'll depend on the riparian areas.
Ms. Rodden, you want to elaborate?
The chair, yes, and sometimes through the act of having a riparian area assessment report completed, the findings are that it's not a fish-bearing stream or water body or wetland, in which case the need for a section 219 covenant would not apply. But unless you do that report, we don't know.
So it really is the details of what is and isn't riparian, and then those parameters around protection, et cetera, are defined.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions from the group? I think we'll call the question then. All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so we got one more here, 8.2. I'm going to open the right one. This is a Crown land application for utilities right of way out at St. Vincent's Bay in Electoral Area C. There are 3 points to this recommendation. Again, a survey plan showing the location of completed and proposed works in that right of way in relation to nearby watercourse. And if anything has occurred or planned to take place within 30 meters of watercourse, they, the same thing, required a professional environmental riparian area assessment that complies with the regulation. And then the third one is to work with the applicant to ensure all proposed work take place outside of those protected areas. Do I have a mover? Director Brander, seconder? Director Gisborne, thank you. Discussion. Pretty straightforward. I think the report was very detailed and answered all the questions I had. So we'll call the question then. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. I don't see any new business. No. Question period. Okay. Any questions?
I have questions.
Great.
Questions are.
Right, okay, that's good for me to remember. Questions are about what's on the agenda.
Okay, well, so I'm Rachel Snyder. I live out south. I actually brought a letter here and sent one, and that wasn't on the correspondence. So I have some questions regarding why there was no addressing any sort of wildfire preparedness or anything about community awareness coming into fire season. Okay. I would like to know what the board is planning to do in support of the MFD and getting that back online in my area, because the board,
the what?
The Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department, because the regional district has stepped beyond the BC playbook of professional firefighters. So I want to know how I'm covered. I want to know how I'm safe in my area.
Okay, those are good questions. Staff, how do you think we should handle this question that's not relevant to our agenda?
Yeah, so sorry, thank you, Chair. I'm just reviewing.
I just want to make sure I get procedure right here, you know.
So the public will be given an opportunity to ask questions of the chair or through the chair of any member regarding matter of business considered at the meeting. This time is expressly devoted to questions only. Members must not engage in debate, and the assembly will not consider questions pertaining to any other matter not discussed at the meeting except with unanimous agreement of the members.
Okay. So in English, it's up to us.
It is outside of the scope of this.
It is, okay. Yes, so.
So there is no planning for wildfire safety in my area? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, we've got a few different questions here that aren't relevant to what's on the agenda. You have good.
Why is it not on the agenda for the planning then?
Well, CAO?
Through the chair, for one reason, the topic is not for the planning committee. It's better addressed by the committee of the whole. And that's where it probably should be in, or that's where you would be best addressing questions of that nature. We have various committee types.
Okay, but what I heard you say in this meeting, and I don't come to these meetings, and I do not understand how this local government stuff works.
Understood.
Okay, because what I understand is that the BC Professional Firefighters sets out the playbook.
Okay.
We have overstepped that playbook. We have put people in positions that they are not qualified to be in. So I want to know, what are we planning to do to make me safe in my area again?
We can definitely address those, but that wouldn't be at the planning committee. Planning committee is for land.
Yeah.
Okay, so my land out south that I'm really concerned about, because we're going into wildfire season, we're in droughts, the rest of the province is increasing their spending in their fire departments. We have not seen anything improve in my fire department in my area. I want to know why.
But again, through the chair, the best thing to do is address those through the committee of the whole.
And I just want to add, you have actually some very good questions, right? Like as a taxpayer, as a citizen, like believe me, those questions are totally valid. It's just for the planning committee, it's outside of what.
I just get really sick of people pointing fingers and nobody answering my questions.
We want you to actually be able to come before the right, so that we can actually answer your questions procedurally and then move ahead, right, with any actions that we need. So like your time is valuable, yes?
And if I may, perhaps I can, after the meeting, I can just provide some instruction on how we can get you on an agenda in the future. And
yeah, sorry, and help you define, like, you have several items here, several questions are important. We want to get it right because, you know, we don't want to be all over the map. So can we work with you on that?
Yeah, we can. And I would also like to ask the planning committee to consider the idea of renaming the ball field at Palm Beach, Kiever Field, putting that ball field back to use so that the community can use it. If Larry Guthrow Park at Manson Park has got named for that guy for coaching kids, Dave has coached more people and taught more firefighters and come to more bad days in people's lives than anybody else in this community.
100%.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll make sure we get your contact info there, Sarah, maybe, or.
Oh, yes. I dropped it off.
Okay.
I've emailed you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Director Gizmo, just briefly.
Yeah, because I know the next committee of the whole meeting is June 26th.
Okay.
We do have a finance committee meeting in an hour and 40 minutes. I think there was part of the question that had to do with finance. Would there be any overlap with that?
Officer?
Through the chair, I think if you start to entertain that, you're gonna ask her to come back for 3 or 4 or 5 meetings.
No.
I think it's best to just be done at one.
I'm quite happy to come back for all the meetings to understand where the money is, because if you spent more monies on lawyers fighting job action stuff than you have on putting equipment and firefighters in the community, you got to answer for that.
So I guess there's some options, right, at the finances coming up today.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the finance addresses some of it.
But we wouldn't want to get the whole.
I do think that it might be best suited for the committee of the whole or a board meeting.
Okay.
So
we're gonna let our staff work with you just to get it right so that we can answer all your questions with the right people and not give you sort of this back and forth, right? We want to get this right. Okay. Good.
I also want to speak to the same topic in a different way. what has happened is that,
Sorry, ma'am, your name?
Sylvia Chambers.
Yep.
What has happened is that our community does no longer feel safe with the fire protection we have had because our most competent people have been fired. We have to address our safety for our community and our land. So I want to speak to this topic also. And I want to speak to the topic of why our firefighters are being bullied. So I also want to have a stage to speak on these issues, and I have a few of them. Because people don't get fired for no reason.
Yeah, so this is a time to ask questions, right?
Yes.
Or
So I'm asking a question of why fire safety and why the people that had the knowledge to do all of the fire safety activities on our regional lands.
Okay.
Yes, so when is a good time to set up a meeting for this occasion?
Yes.
Because it will go into detail about how the people in the QRD have responded to the needs of our firefighters.
100%.
And that is a serious issue.
Okay, thank you. I think the answer is that we're going to get you to work with staff because we want to hear exactly what you have to say.
Yes. And as soon as possible, because these people have had their reputations slandered.
I think, yeah, so I think the right method is to get the information, the document that you want answered, and then have that.
I've requested many documents, but I hear it takes 30 days, and I hear you don't necessarily get the documents you want.
And have those presented on an agenda, like have, address it in that way.
Yes. As members of this community, we cannot let this issue lie under any circumstances. We have our firefighters in fear.
I want our staff to flush this out for you though, so let's.
Once this meeting adjourns, I would suggest, thank you, Chair, that I'll come and meet with you to figure out where we're going to put this.
Yes, and appreciate your time and being concise with your questions, and we want to get back.
It's fear of our community safety.
There's my house insurance doubling on top of my property.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about for sure. So
yes, we do.
Okay, so thank you. You got that one. Great. Any other questions? Don't see any. Where are we now? In camera. Oh, sorry. Done. Okay. We are adjourned.
Sure.
Yes.
Recording
A
stopped.
spare laptop charger.
I do actually.
Usually mine's good for the whole day.